Hi, everyone. My name is Julie Stigmeyer, and I work with the Graduate Resource Center and the Writing Studio at Concordia University, Irvine. Today, we're going to be covering some information about academic writing. This presentation will be broken up into 3 videos that follow this basic organization. We'll first talk about organization and flow. Then the integration of research will be in the second video, and style and tone will be in the third. So this is our basic outline. We'll talk about these specific areas throughout these presentations. So with the first part, we're going to touch on how to organize your paper so that it flows seamlessly and naturally, and how to ensure the paper is coherent and cohesive. And we'll talk about the difference between those two terms. In terms of continuity and flow, we want to think about effective writing being characterized by consistency of expression throughout a written work. And this comes straight from the APA manual, which, by the way, has really good information on the basics of writing at a scholarly level. This continuity refers to the words themselves, concepts, and thematic development. So for example, if I were to make a comment on a student's paper about, say, an abbreviation, if a common term in the paper is abbreviated toward the beginning of the paper, then that should be consistent throughout the paper. So those kinds of things are what we're looking for. Flow is the smooth cadence of words and sentences to make the reading easy for your reader, to explain relationships clearly and present them in a logical order to improve readability. So your goal as the writer is always to make the reading easier. And that means you have to work hard to explain those connections and the relationships between your ideas. Because lacking this, the work may seem disorganized or confusing, and details may seem incomplete or inconsistent. So all this information is directly from the APA manual. In terms of scholarly writing in general, not necessarily from APA, but just in general, we usually have this funnel type approach to writing, where we begin generally and then end, or throughout that process of throughout the way that the paragraph moves or the whole paper moves, it becomes gradually more specific toward the middle, and then at the end we kind of broaden again and wrap up the content. So let's just make it simple and think about like the introduction to a paper. We might begin with 2 sentences that show the basic context. We are not getting into citing information. We're just giving the reader some general context about the topic. Then in the middle of the section is where we elaborate. Here's where we would put examples, explanations, paraphrases, and then we wrap up with a broader statement, kind of connecting to that opening. So this is really a true flow for the whole concept, the whole paper, as well as for each paragraph in the paper. So the benefits of this type of flow is it keeps the writer attuned to the reader. So it's very easy sometimes for writers to think, what I'm saying is so clear in my mind that I don't really have to explain it fully, or that might look like I'm dumbing it down or something like that. But actually, those explanations and that context provide such strength to your writing that your reader is very at ease as they are going through your work. The reader will not be able to follow specific details without first understanding some context. So providing that like umbrella or those general thoughts can really help with that. And it allows you as the writer to fully develop the topic. So sometimes if students are struggling with like content in terms of quantity, a lot of times it's because they've honed in on those specific details without providing those explanations. So if you provide that context, it can really help you to more fully develop your ideas. This is an example of a really well-written general to specific paragraph. So it says students with learning disabilities often struggle with mathematical concepts due to cognitive processing difficulties, impacting their problem-solving abilities and overall academic performance. These challenges include difficulties with reading comprehension, which is crucial for understanding word problems, and visual spatial skills needed for tasks like geometry. Engagement levels are often lower due to high anxiety and a lack of competence, further impeding performance. Additionally, persistent issues include number sense, problem solving, and mathematical reasoning. Thus, due to various reasons, students with learning disabilities may experience difficulties as they process mathematical concepts. So thanks to Rhoda Burcham for this excellent example. And I want just to point out a couple of things. You'll see that this first sentence begins broadly, right? We have some key terms listed. Students with learning disabilities, their struggle with mathematical concepts, the cognitive processing difficulties, and then how that affects their learning. And then at the end, we have some of those key points repeated. The students with learning disabilities, their difficulties, and their processing mathematical concepts. And in the middle is where we have so much explanation and elaboration. So this gives really good examples of word problems, visual spatial skills. They might even be affected by anxiety and confidence, and then more specific examples. But the first and last sentences are pretty broad. Now, I said a moment ago that usually when we begin a paragraph, we may not have citations. There are exceptions to that, and that would be in a paragraph like this, where you have two different researchers cited. So you're already paraphrasing and making these generalizations between the research studies. So this works really well. But overall, we see in this paragraph the general to specific information flow. Now let's turn to the concepts of coherence and cohesion. So in the dictionary, coherence and cohesion are similar. They're either the quality of forming a unified whole or the action or fact of forming a united whole. Sounds very similar, right? Well, usually in writing instruction, we define these a little more specifically. So coherence, they do mean the same thing. Everything's unified, right? But we refer to coherence on the global level. So the unified and clear ideas throughout the piece of writing are focused on with coherence. Whereas with cohesion, we have at the minute level, the local level, the connections or ideas between sentences. So we're really looking at the whole piece, which would be, the way the sections are ordered, the paragraph order, even like the topic and what's presented within it. That's really related to coherence, whereas cohesion is much more local. We're looking at one sentence to the next and the sentences within a single paragraph to see how they flow together. So there are different strategies we can try for each of these. So first of all, we want to look at the focus of a single paragraph. Then there's a great strategy called the meal plan. And occasionally we might use the reverse outline to help with coherence. So generally, it's a great idea to limit each paragraph to one topic. If you're finding, this is again back to maybe if a student's struggling with length, like they need more to say, well, it's possible they packed so much into one paragraph that then they, their paper's finished. So if you limit the focus to one idea per paragraph and you really take your time in explaining it within the context, you'll find that not only will your writing be clearer and more fully developed, but it also helps the reader to follow along. In APA manual, there's no limit on the length of paragraphs, but 5 to 8 sentences usually works well in terms of the length on a double-spaced page. That's usually about, I don't know, a third to half a page, depending on the type of document. For a more complicated dissertation or something like that, it might be a little longer. For, other papers that are, lower stakes, it might be shorter. The meal plan is a strategy that you've probably been familiar with since maybe junior high. I remember in junior high, my writing teacher telling us about the hamburger, where your bun is the introduction, the bottom bun is the conclusion, and in the middle, where you have the meat and the lettuce and the onion, all those are your details. So it's really the same idea, but this is a little more advanced when it's broken down this way. So we look at the letters MEAL to figure out usually how to just address one paragraph. So we begin with the M, which is the main idea. It's just a simple topic sentence, including the central purpose of the paragraph. Then the E stands for evidence, where we have examples, quotations, paraphrases that add credibility to this main idea. Then we might have some analysis where we explain or further describe the evidence, and then link back to the larger claim. So a couple of caveats here. The main idea sometimes, like I said, does not have any citations in it, as long as it's broad enough and you're not getting really specific on details, which it should be anyway. You don't always need citations. The E is where you're going to have lots of citations, and it doesn't mean you only have 4 sentences. The evidence could span for 3 or 4 sentences. The analysis is not an opinion. It's not you telling your opinion about the, research, but rather it's interpreting it and re-explaining it to the reader. So you might have a sentence about the research, and then the next sentence says, this research demonstrates that blah, 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 or these 2 researchers agree on whatever. So that's sometimes how that looks. And then the link usually is a kind of concluding sentence, but it can be combined sometimes with this analysis. But here's an example of a well-written meal paragraph. So here we have the M. Despite established benefits, implementing SEL in academic settings presents several challenges. So note with this sentence, we don't have specific challenges yet. It's just identifying the topic, its benefits, but also its challenges. So that's a really great main idea because it provides that umbrella, and then all the other ideas flow into it or under it. Then we have 3 examples of the E, where we have maintaining program fidelity and ensuring cultural relevance are concerns. Kim et al., who emphasized that limitations in research methodologies such as statistical analysis can complicate evaluations. And then another researcher finding that sustained student engagement can be difficult. Then notice here the analysis. This can potentially limit SEL's academic benefits. So that's kind of in piggyback to the previous sentence and not maybe all of the evidence, but it's just a way that the writer is more fully explaining the evidence. And then here's the link with kind of a call to action. Addressing these challenges requires a focus on adapting SEL programs to diverse student needs, and fostering engagement through innovative methods. So another excellent example of a paragraph from Emily Nguyen, MEAD student. So think about this. If we had all paragraphs that had this kind of a structure with a very clear main idea, then think about how easy it would be to skim a paper. So remember, you're always trying to make the process easy on your reader. And that's for readability level, for one. You want to make it very readable. But also, it's important to think of who your audience is. Your audience is your grader, usually, right? Your professor. So really explaining those ideas and elaborating on them can be helpful. And if you have those main idea sentences throughout, it can really help with that overall coherence. The last strategy under coherence is one that is used sometimes. I use this with students. If a full text is written, but it seems to need reorganization. So for example, let's say there's a chapter 2 or a literature review where there's maybe one paragraph about one topic, and then 2 pages later, there's another paragraph about that same topic, but they're not placed together. Well, doing a reverse outline can help, because what you can do is go through each paragraph and in each highlight the main idea in a different color. So each new subtopic is in a different color. So then you can, once you do all of that work going through it, then you can be like, oh, okay, well, here's the blue highlight. Let's put all those together in this section. Here's the yellow, and let's put all those together. So that can be, it's not super common, and it's sometimes, I don't want to say like a last ditch effort, but it's more of like, hopefully the organization was applied at the beginning of the paper. But if you got deep into a project and feel like it's needing reorganization, this is a great strategy. And then the last thing I want to mention is strategies for coherence. So we use transitional words, and here's a resource to indicate all sorts of relationships. We're trying to make connections between sentences or paragraphs. So we have to indicate addition, cause and effect, comparison, contrast. So I like this list because it helps me to understand the relationship, but also to see lots of examples. And then also we can chain or link old and new information. And I want to show you how that looks. Often we can do very little, just really easy touches to create this kind of cohesion. We can use words like these or this. We can repeat keywords. And what this helps prevent is where each sentence is kind of standing on its own. It's like solo. It doesn't really show how the ideas connect. So I often will hear from students, this paragraph feels really choppy. And often this strategy can help in that case. So for example, this was one of the previous paragraphs I referred to. We have some very light touches in this paragraph where these challenges refers back to the new information shared in the first sentence. So here we have cognitive processing difficulties, the struggle with mathematical concepts. So then there's a really quick, tag of that, these challenges. So it's referring back. And then real easy, there are some transitions placed intentionally to try to show the connections between ideas. So that really helps to show that, first of all, what you're doing is you have your reader in mind. Second, you're showing how the research fits together. And that's really just doing your homework, because usually when you're writing a paragraph with a lot of research, you're trying to summarize all of that for the reader in perhaps the literature review. And in that case, your professor's often looking for that kind of overarching understanding of what are the trends in the research. So if you can give those transitions, that can be really helpful. Okay, on to the next section next time. Happy writing.